Okay, we have got a decent amount to get through, so let's get started. First and foremost, thank you everybody for joining. If you're in Europe, good afternoon. If you're calling in from the US, good morning. If you're in APAC, good evening. My name is Owen Hinchy. I'm founder of Tines, and today I'm really excited and I'm privileged to get to walk you through a brief overview of the product and then a product demo. This is the first webinar that I've ever presented, and it's kind of fitting that it's to do with Black Hat, that we're running this in conjunction with Black Hat EU. I cannot even count how many times I've attended Black Hat, both in the US and in Europe. So it's a real pleasure to participate in some Black Hat event in 2020. We didn't get to spend any time in the lobby of a Vegas casino this year, but hey, my work from home space is kind of like a Vegas casino in that there's no clocks, and I spend most of my time here wildly confused. Um, Alrighty, so what we're going to do today is we're going to walk through about 10 minutes of slides, 5 to 10 minutes of slides. I'm not going to walk through our entire product overview deck. I'll just pick a couple of key slides out of the deck, and then we'll move straight into the demo and try to spend as much time as possible in the demo. In terms of logistics, you guys are all on mute. If you have any questions, feel free to post them into the Q&A box in your Zoom software, and we will answer them as we see them. We'll also share any material that we run through today after the call. Okay, so some background. As I said, my name is Owen Hinchy. Tines is about 2.5 years old. I founded the company in February 2018, early 2018, having spent about 15 years working in cybersecurity, primarily in technical roles in large enterprises. So I worked in incident response in eBay and PayPal for a number of years. I was senior director of security operations for DocuSign. And most of my career was really spent kind of like building incident response, threat hunting, threat response, security engineering, malware analytics teams. That's kind of where I cut my teeth. It was really while working in those teams that we felt the need for a platform like Tines. So we had in DocuSign a really talented bunch of security analysts and engineers working in our SOC. And they were spending more and more of their time responding to the same alerts over and over again. Think running down phishing emails, validating vulnerability scans, threat hunting IOC, sharing indicators with peers, all that kind of fun stuff. And when we benchmarked it, we found that about 80% of our security team's time was spent doing something that they'd already done that day. And because these folks were really knowledgeable security practitioners, but not developers, they didn't have the skill set to write the software to get themselves off that treadmill. And even if they did, we didn't want these people who weren't professional software engineers producing mission critical software that would be poorly managed, difficult to maintain, hard to scale, et cetera, et cetera. And so this would have been 2017. We started looking around for platforms that would allow these frontline engineers and analysts automate their repetitive manual tasks without having to write code. And we looked at about a dozen different platforms, all the way from the top vendors in the game at the time, all the way through to consumer products like Zapier and if this then that. And long story short, we hated every single one of them for various reasons. And I said, you know what, I think I can do a better job of this myself. And so founded Tines really with the ambition and the Northern Star of building the platform that I wished had been available for my security teams when I worked in companies like eBay, PayPal, and so on. And that was a platform that would allow anyone, regardless of their background, regardless of their technical know-how, regardless of their developer skill set, automate any workflow, regardless of the complexity and regardless of the technology stack. And so that's what Tines is. Tines is a platform that's going to allow your frontline staff automate their repetitive manual tasks, regardless of the complexity and regardless of the tool stack. The problems that we are solving. So these are the three main problems that I came across in my career in enterprise security. The first is that there's just way too much work. I like this statistic that 79% of security teams are overwhelmed by the volume of alerts they receive. I mainly like it because I really want to know what the other 21% are doing to not feel overwhelmed. because I have genuinely never met a security team who were doing what they should have been doing, who were looking into places that they should have been looking in, who are tuning the alerts the way they should have been tuned, who weren't overwhelmed. There's just so much data, so many systems, so many places to look that it's really, really difficult to stay on top of it. And because we're kind of under a lot of pressure to catch alerts and examine alerts, we kind of err on the side of noisy alerts, and that leads to false positives, alert fatigue, and so on. The second problem is that there's just not enough staff. It used to take us between 9 to 12 months to hire a senior security engineer, a little bit longer if you're hiring in a hotspot like the Bay Area or the Pacific Northwest or Dublin or Berlin or somewhere like that. And when you would find this person, you would compensate them really, really well. You would train them up, and then you would just have them doing the same tasks over and over again. Like, for example, responding to EDR alerts, running down vuln scans, confirming activity by DevOps teams, all that kind of stuff. And as a result of this kind of like low fulfilling but really necessary work, people just get bored and they churn and they go to a different company. And then you got to start the process all over again. And then this third problem is the sense of inevitable incidents. So I've been involved in many high publicity incidents in my time. I know firsthand how difficult it is to prevent incidents at scale. It's extremely difficult. The average cost of breach is now $4 million. I actually think that's a little bit low. The breaches that I've been involved in, which will tell you everything you need to know about me, have typically cost a little bit more than that. So these are the three problems that we're trying to solve in Tines. The reason we founded this company is because we genuinely believe that a really good answer, not the only answer, there's no silver bullets here, but a really good answer to all three of these problems is advanced contextually aware security automation. If you're consuming 99% of your alerts via Tines or another automation platform, enriching, weeding out false positives, and validating the alerts before it's put on the plate of a security analyst, you're going to dramatically reduce the amount of work, ops work on your security team's plate. As a result, you're not going to need as much headcount, and the headcount that you have can be deployed more effectively. And then finally, because you have more staff working on higher impact projects like threat hunting and company specific risk reduction, you're going to reduce the likelihood of a breach or an incident. And that's really what we're trying to do here. Okay, so I'm going to assume that you guys haven't much experience with security automation platforms. Tines is a little bit different to other automation platforms anyway. But essentially with Tines, what we're trying to do is empower your security team, automate their own manual workloads without having to fall back on scripting or custom software development. And by doing that, you're going to enable more ability to scale your incident response program, your threat hunting program, and your security program in general. And you're also going to use Tines to talk to any tool in your stack. So Tines is designed to be 100% vendor agnostic. It's going to work with any system that has a REST API. So some of the benefits of security automation and Tines in particular are on this screen. I'm not going to spend too much time on these just because I think it's kind of self-explanatory and a little bit self-evident. A couple of things that I really like here is, we're not trying to reduce headcount. We're not trying to reduce the overall size of your security team. What we're trying to do is make it more effective and efficient. So take the resources that already exist, and rather than have them focused on those low impact but necessary tasks, have them focused on the more engaging work that's going to have a larger impact on the business. One question that we get asked pretty regularly is, how can I use Tines, or how should I use automation? These are the 9 most common use cases that we see in Tines. Again, Tines is designed to work with any use case, right? So it's going to work with any use case, regardless of the complexity, regardless of the technology stack. And as a result, we tend to see Tines used in a lot more use cases than these 9 here. For example, the average number of production use cases for a Tines customer is 20. If you've been using the platform for over a year, that number increases to 30. And we have several customers who have over 100 production use cases with Tines. If you compare that to some of our competitors, the average number of production use case for one of our competitors will be between 5 and 10. The reason for that kind of disparity is, I think, because Tines is designed to be used by people on the front line to solve their own problem, there just tends to be a whole lot more traction generated from the tool. As I mentioned, we've been in business for about 2.5 years at this stage. The product's been for sale for about 18 months. These are some of the companies that we have the pleasure of working with. This is just a selection of some of our reference customers. The majority of our customers come to us organically and through word of mouth. So we work with everything from a Fortune 5 with over 100,000 employees in McKesson, through public and private SaaS companies like Box and Coinbase, all the way through to startups like Auth0 and BitGo. The thing we're most proud of here is every single one of these companies is getting value from the platform. Every single one of these companies is using Tines more today than they were a year ago. We're really, really proud of that fact. Okay, so last couple of slides before we move into the demo. So how is Tines different? So we really differentiate ourselves in 3 ways: flexibility, usability, and focus. Remember those 3 things. In terms of flexibility, Tines is designed to work with any tool in your stack. So if you compare Tines to other automation platforms, and not just security automation platforms, but if you think about security automation platforms in particular, they really live and die on their ability to take data from one place, manipulate it in some way, and put it somewhere else. So take data from your SIEM, enrich it from your Active Directory, and create a ticket. The way every other automation platform works today, the way they talk to other tools in your stack, is they use what we call a model of app-based integration. What that means is your vendor, your security automation vendor, is going to build you an app, a pre-built integration that allows you to talk to other tools in your stack. So for example, if you're a CrowdStrike customer, your SOAR vendor is going to build you a CrowdStrike app. And that app is going to allow you to perform a subset of actions against the CrowdStrike API. So things like quarantine a device, run a process search, or search for an IOC. The problem with that model of app-based integration is that by design, you are restricted to what you can automate interaction with by the apps that your SOAR platform supports. So for example, if you're using a security tool that isn't widely known or doesn't have a pre-built integration for your SOAR platform, you're kind of stymied. You're either going to have to go and beg and plead with your SOAR vendor to go prioritize that app for you, or you're going to have to go and divert some of your valuable software resources to go and build that app yourselves, or pay the automation vendor pro serve hours to go do it for you. In addition, if you've built any of your own technology, so if your company is building your own security tools or DevOps tools or IT tools or services, you're never going to be able to automate interaction with those tools out of the box. There's going to be a huge amount of upfront work required to build all the integrations that you required. And then there's an enormous tax in terms of like maintaining those library of integrations. With Tines, our model of integration is what we call direct integration. What that means is we have no apps, plugins, modules, custom integrations. Tines works with any tool that has a REST API. We provide a consistent integration experience regardless of what your technology stack is. We treat CrowdStrike the exact same way as Carbon Black, as Endgame, as SentinelOne. It's just an API. And that's kind of the flexibility part. In terms of the usability differentiation, we are laser focused on ensuring that the main users of Tines are people on the front line. And so every feature that we release is designed to make it easier for people who don't know how to write code to automate the repetitive manual tasks. And if you do know how to write code, that's absolutely fine. However, Tines is going to ultimately help people who don't know how to write code automate their repetitive manual tasks. And then our final differentiation is focus. And so Tines fundamentally believes that the main constraint for security teams today is an ability to do more with less, to be able to automate integration with all your tools, take data, glue them together, and perform remediation action. And so we are laser focused on workflow automation. We do not do the other kind of baggage that other SOAR platforms come with. So we do not do case management. We do not do threat intelligence. We do not do collaboration. Instead, we just make it really, really easy for you to use Tines to connect to tools which you've already bought, which you already have in your organization, like Jira, ServiceNow, TrueStar, so on and so forth. All right, this is the last slide I'll show before we jump into the demo. So there's 3 things that you need to know about in Tines in order to understand how this program works. We have spent the vast majority of our engineering time, and where most of our IP is tied up is in what we call the agent event architecture. And this is what gives Tines all its power. There are 3 components to it: agents, events, and stories. I'll go through each one. Agents are the building blocks of your automation stories. So don't think of these as like endpoint agents or customer success agents. Think of agents as building blocks for your workflows. There are only 7 types of agents in Tines. That is it. So every single workflow that you automate, regardless of whether it's EDR, phishing, vuln management, onboarding employees, sales, recruitment, it's only ever a different combination of these 7 agent types configured in slightly different ways. And so Tines is really, really simple. What you're going to do is you're going to take the process you want to automate, you're going to break it into individual steps, and you're going to decide which of these 7 agent types is most suited to perform that step. That's it. That's all Tines is, 7 agent types. And we can teach you how to configure these 7 types of agents in about 3 hours, or you can teach yourself in about 3 hours. So after 3 hours, you will be able to automate any manual workflow, regardless of complexity, regardless of use case, regardless of technology stack. Doesn't matter. It's just a different combination of these 7 agents. And so after about 3 hours, you will essentially be as effective and efficient as a senior software engineer with a bunch of experience. And because we're taking care of all the messiness like scalability, security, version control, security, you can focus on your workflow. The second component then are what we call events. And events are the structured data sent between agents. So an agent is going to perform its small piece of the workflow, and the results of its action is going to be sent as an event to the next agent in the story. That's it. Events are JSON objects, so they're flexible, easy to read. They're also write once, read many times, so you can use them for like the calculation of KPIs, like mean time to detection and so on. And then the final component are what we call stories. And you can think of stories as analogous to workflows or playbooks or SOPs or use cases. They are a collection of agents working towards a singular mission. We provide out-of-the-box stories for common use cases that we think are best practice. So we'll provide you an automation story for phishing response, vuln management, threat hunting, crowdsourcing response, stuff like that. But the real power comes from Tines when you start taking these 7 agent types and snapping them into your existing processes or building processes from first principles in Tines. Okay, so that's all the slides I'm going to show you guys. If you have any questions, again, feel free to pop them into the box and we'll get them as we can. Before I move into the demo, feel free to ask questions and so on. All righty. Okay, so a couple of things about the platform right off the bat. So this is going to be a live demo, so apologies in advance if in the unlikely event that something goes wrong. We're obviously security and privacy engineers by trade. That's our background. It's in our DNA. And so we've built this platform to be secure and private from the ground up. So you can deploy Tines in 2 separate ways. You can deploy in our hosted cloud, where we do all the updates, we manage all the infrastructure via our SOC 2 data center and so on. Or you can deploy using our containers in your own infrastructure. So if you've got particular compliance requirements like FedRAMP or a lot of behind the firewall technology you need to integrate with, that's absolutely fine. Same application, just deployed in 2 separate ways. If you deploy in our hosted cloud, you get things like security features like single tenant architecture. So every single customer tenant is air gapped from every other customer tenant. We provide SSO and SAML out of the box for free on every single plan. Security does not cost extra in Tines. We enforce mandatory 2-factor authentication on every single account, no exceptions. And you also get granular control over data residency and retention within the application. So let's get into the demo. The way we demo this is we walk through an automation story. And the automation story that we walk through is phishing response. The reason we choose phishing response is kind of a couple of reasons. One is in Tines, it really doesn't matter what the use case is, right? Tines is going to work the exact same for every single use case. So if you can automate phishing, you can automate EDR alerting, you can automate threat hunting, you can automate employee onboarding. It's just a different combination of those 7 agents. We choose phishing because it's something we find most security teams are familiar with and something they can relate to. In addition, it's actually a use case, as any of you who know who've actually handled phishing response at scale, it's actually a process that can get pretty complex, quite a lot of edge cases really, really quickly. So it's a good one to use for the demo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this story. And so what we should see here is the screen that you see on front of you is what we call the storyboard. And this is where our customers spend 99% of their time. This is where you build your automated workflows and Tines. We know based on that very, very brief presentation that an automation story is a collection of agents that are connected together. And so the boxes that you see on the screen in front of you here are the different agents in the story. The different colors are the different agent types. Remember, there's only 7 types of agents in Tines. I'm going to say that over and over again. There's only 7 types of agents in Tines. That's it. And once you know how to configure these 7 types of agents, that's all you'll ever need to know in Tines. So let's talk about this process in the manual world. If you're familiar with this process, this'll all be very, very very routine for you. But let's say you have a security awareness program in your organization, and that security awareness program trains employees that if they receive a unsolicited or suspicious email, they should send it to a particular inbox for analysis by a security team. That could be security@tines.io, report phishing at tines.io, report spam at tines.io. We've seen all kinds of ones. At the other end of that inbox is a team or an individual whose job it is to watch those emails come in, analyze them, and make a call on whether or not the email represents a threat. And if it does represent a threat, perform some remediation action. That's what we're going to automate in Tines today. And so with Tines, remember, all we're trying to do is take our process, break it into individual steps, and decide which of the 7 agent types is most suited to perform that step. In our process, the very first step is obviously to see if there's any new emails. The way we can do that in Tines is with the IMAP agent. And so the very first agent in our story, Tines stories are going to run top down. So the top agent is our first agent. Our very first agent is an IMAP agent. And again, remember, Tines is designed to work with any tool in your stack. So we don't care if you're using G Suite, O365, Domino, Lord help us. It doesn't matter. We treat every tool the exact same way. So the IMAP agent, I can see what the IMAP agent does by going here, just clicking View Docs. We have a fully featured, fairly extensive set of docs that are publicly available. And for the IMAP agent, we can see that the IMAP agent emits events when it detects new emails on an IMAP server. That's it. That's all this agent type does. Every time it sees an email it's never seen before, it's going to emit an event. And the way we then configure that agent is in what we call the options block. And so all 7 of the agent types have a different set of configuration options. And you can see the different configuration options available for those agents by clicking here and seeing host, username, password, the exact kind of things you would expect to see for an IMAP server. So host, username, password. We're going to use the host box.tines.xyz. That's just our test IMAP server. We're going to use the username report phishing at tines.xyz. And we're going to store the password securely in our internal credential manager. So we will securely store your credentials in that they're fully encrypted on the back end, different encryption keys for every single customer, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're a customer or if you're a organization that centrally manages your credentials in something like HashiCorp Vault or CyberArk or Secrets Manager, Tines can automate interaction with that as well so that we can get a fresh credential as needed. So that's it. That's all this agent does. It's going to log into this server with these credentials and emit an event for every email it's never seen before. The next step in our process is to pull out IOCs. So we want to look at the attachments and we want to look at the URLs in order to determine if they're malicious. So the way we do that in Tines is with event transformation agents. So the next two agents in the story, extract URLs and explode attachments, as you can see, are both event transformation. And so if I go here and view the docs for event transformation, I'll see that the event transformation agent has several modes that modify the contents of incoming events. That's it. That's what this agent is going to do. It's going to allow you modify the contents of an event. And there's a few different ways it can do that. So you can do things like deduplicate. So if, for example, you're getting the same alert over and over again, or you are being hammered by the same false positive over and over again, you can deduplicate based on a particular piece of information, or for a certain number, or over a specific period. So you can say, I'm running a phishing test today. I want to deduplicate these emails for the next 24 hours. In addition, you can do things like delay. So you can say, OK, well, I'm going to kick off a vuln scan, and then I'm going to delay before checking in an error when it's completed. What we want to do is find the URLs in the body of an email. So we're going to use extract. And extract is going to allow us to use regular expressions to extract text from the fields and incoming events. That's it. So now, remember, this tool is designed to be used by people that don't know how to write code. And if you're like me, and despite 15 years of trying, you still cannot write a regular expression to save your life, that is OK. We've got you covered. In Tines, we have what we call agent templates. And agent templates are about 1,500 pre-configured agents designed to perform actions commonly performed by security teams. So for example, over here on the left-hand side of the page, I have a full list of all 1,500 agent templates, public and private. And so what I can do is I can do something like extract IP. And here, I'll have an agent template that's pre-designed to extract IPs using a regex. And I've got a description for what that agent does. If I drag that guy into the page, drop him in here, I can see that this agent is configured with the regex that I need in order to find IP addresses. So you do not need to know how to write code in Tines. If you do, fantastic, but it is not a requirement. OK, now that I've extracted the URLs, I want to start analyzing them. And this is where Tines gets really, really interesting. So remember, we are 100% vendor agnostic. We don't care what your stack looks like. So if you're using VirusTotal to analyze URLs, great. If you're using URL Scan, fantastic. If you're using Recorded Future, RiskIQ, FireEye, Mandiant, it doesn't matter. We treat every tool that has an API the exact same way. You're always going to use the HTTP request agent. So when you're talking to an external system that has an API, it's always the HTTP request agent. And so if we look at the request to submit the VirusTotal in our story here, we'll see it looks like this. So we've got the URL, we've got the method, and we've got the payload that we want to send to VirusTotal. If we look at how the HTTP request agent is configured for URL scan, slightly different, but the exact same agent type. What that means is you have a consistent integration experience regardless of the tool that you're using. So if tomorrow you decide, hey, you know what, I don't want to use URL scan and VirusTotal, I've just purchased RiskIQ, or I've just purchased a license to hybrid analysis, you can use a HTTP request agent, drag it onto the page, and configure the request to talk to that tool which you've just invested in. So there is never a requirement on Tines to build pre-built integrations for you. It's always going to work. Now, if you're using something like hybrid analysis, or let's say recorded future URL, chances are we already have an agent pre-configured. So search for URL and recorded future. So we have an agent that's pre-configured to make that request to recorded future. But again, you do not have to use the templates if you don't want it. And our customers love that because it provides them a huge amount of flexibility, and Tines is never the bottleneck. OK, so now that we have run searches against our various threat intelligence tools, in this case, in this case, VirusTotal and URL Scan, we're going to want to start making decisions. So we've collected the context around those URLs and attachments. We want to start making decisions. The way you make decisions in Tines is, surprise, surprise, with another one of the 7 agent types, the trigger agent. And so the trigger agent is the agent that is designed to make decisions. And you can use the trigger agent to make really, really simple logic-based decisions. Things like, if this number is bigger than this bigger other number, emit an event. If it's not, ignore it. Or you can build really, really complex, highly granular rules by anding and oring rules together. So you can have something like, if the binary that CrowdStrike has detected is known bad, and it's in the C drive, and it's unsigned, and it's on a laptop belonging to a VIP, and that VIP is on PTO, whatever it is, you can get really, really granular and have high confidence in the decision that you're making. And because these agents, every single agent, the way it's configured is with a JSON object, you can actually store the configuration for these agents in like a central repository somewhere. So you can store these agents in GitHub and actually map your agent configuration directly to your threat detection pipelines. Really, really cool, powerful feature. Okay, so we're going to use a trigger agent to determine if the information coming back from VirusTotal and URL scan suggests that the email is malicious. Once we have that, we're going to start creating a paper trail. So we're going to want to start creating tickets that we can track because we have a malicious email in our environment. We are laser focused on workflow automation and Tines. Again, I'm going to say that a few times here as well. We do not do ticket management in Tines. Instead, we are going to make it really, really simple for you to talk to existing trouble ticketing tools that you have in your organization. So we're going to make it simple for you to create tickets in ServiceNow, Jira, Zendesk, GitHub Issues, Google Sheets. It really doesn't matter. It's just a HTTP request agent. In this demo, we're going to use ServiceNow. So we're going to create the ticket in ServiceNow, again, just using a HTTP request agent. Then we're going to do some additional like searches using Tines. So we're going to do some pivot searches. So we're going to see what other users in our organization may have visited that malicious domain. And we're going to do that again with the HTTP request agent. And we don't care what your SIM is. So you can be using Splunk, Datadog, Elastic Stack. It really doesn't matter. It's just a HTTP request agent. In addition, you could be using a data lake. So you could be using something like Snowflake or your own custom database of logs. Tines is always going to use a HTTP request agent to talk to that external tool. So you have that consistent integration experience. So once we have done those searches, we're going to do some additional things like find out who the other users are in our organization by using DHCP. We're going to get some more information. We'll find out who the user is in our environment. In this case, we're going to use OneLogin. But again, we don't care if you're using OneLogin or Okta or G Suite or Azure. We treat all those tools the same way. Once we have that information, we'll get the asset's owner. We'll log the victim out of their accounts, and we'll lock the victim's account. Again, all using HTTP request agents and tools like Okta, OneLogin, and so on. I kind of zip through the configuration of those last few agents just because in the interest of time, I don't want to spend too much of our time together talking about how all these agents are configured. But what I do want to do is spend some time talking about what happens under the hood when these stories run. Right. So what's the actual information that's being sent between agents? And so let's go back up to the very top of this story. And every story in Tines can run in a few different ways. So every single agent has an option for scheduling. So I can do things here like, I want to run this agent every day at 9 a.m. If I have like an employee onboarding schedule, I can do something like every Monday morning at 7 a.m. run this story. Or in this case, I could do something like every 5 minutes, check to see if there's any unread emails, or every minute, check to see if there's any new emails. In addition to that, you can run your agents manually. So that's what I'm going to do here just for the fun of it. So I'm going to click on my IMAP agent and I'm going to press run. And then what we'll see is really, really quickly, these agents begin to emit events. And remember, the events that an agent emits are the results of its action. And we can view what that agent looks like by going to check inbox and events. And so here we go. And the event will be things like the contents of the email. So we've got the subject, who was sent from, the body, the attachments, headers, so on and so forth. All the information that you would expect to see related to an email. And we also have the attachments if there were any. So you can do things like recursive analysis of EML files that are attached to the email. You can do things like unzip files, run the attachments through various sandboxes, and so on and so forth. But this is the information that's going to be sent to the next two agents in the story, like a conveyor belt. And so as soon as my two event transformation agents receive that event, they're going to run. The second they get it, they run, and they're going to perform their action. And this agent's action was to extract URLs. And if we look at the event that this guy's admitted, we'll see a couple of things. Firstly, we'll see that sure enough, this agent has done what it was supposed to do, right? So its job was to find all the URLs in the body of that email. In this case, there was just one. That was it. It looks like a compromised WordPress site. But in addition, the event that this agent has admitted also contains the email. And this is really, really important. So I'm just going to pause on it for 1 sec. Okay. Regardless of which of the 7 agent types you're using in Tines, they all work the exact same way. When they run, the event that they emit is going to contain the results of their action, in this case, extract URLs, and the result of every single agent's action up to that point in the story. Now, that's not too impressive here because it's just 2 agents. However, if we go further down this story to, I don't know, let's say, get DHCP search results or something like that, or yeah, DHCP search results complete and view that event, we'll see that really, really quickly, Tines has collected a bunch of really valuable information from the variable agents and made it available to all subsequent agents in the story. What that means is the more agents you add, the more context you're collecting. And because there's no longer any kind of like manual bandwidth constraints, you can literally analyze every single URL in 20 sandboxes if you want, include all that information in the event that's going to be received by your trigger agent, and use all that data to make a really, really high confidence decision. So you can say that 100% of these sandboxes thought that this URL was not malicious, so I'm probably going to consider it not malicious. Or you can say like, well, 10% considered it was malicious or so on. And so the event that this agent has admitted contains the email, it contains all the extracted URLs, it contains the results from VirusTotal. The other interesting thing about Tines that makes us quite different to every other automation platform you may be familiar with is that we make no assumptions around what information is important to you. So the information that we include in an event is every single piece of information that was returned to us by the target tool. In this case, VirusTotal, we've included every single piece of information VirusTotal has given to us. So we have here all 82 scan engines results available in an event. So if you want to, you can do something like, you know what, I think Kaspersky and Bitdefender are the 2 most reliable AV engines. So I'm going to put a higher credence on what they say. But that data is available to you for you to make the decision that's suitable for your organization. Okay. Next thing I want to show you guys then is story runs. And so with every single agent in Tines, every single alert, every single event that comes in, we create what we call a story run. And essentially a story run provides a paper trail or like breadcrumbs of every single action that's been performed as a result of that email entering Tines or URL or event entering Tines. So we've got the results of the email. We can see what happened. We can see what happened when we submitted to VirusTotal. We can see what happened when we extracted the domain. We can see what happened when we created the ServiceNow ticket. All that kind of information is available in Tines. We can see what happened when we search SIM. It's all there. In addition, we're keeping metrics around this and how long it's taken. So in Tines, we can see for this story, we did 22 events in 21 agents. The story run started at 2:35 at 47, and the duration was 19 seconds. So with Tines, it's really, really easy to be able to say things like, okay, well, it used to take me 15 minutes to manually analyze an email in 2 sandboxes. With Tines, it's now taking 19 seconds to analyze every single email in 15 sandboxes. So not only am I getting much more higher confidence in the analysis that's happening, I'm also doing it in like a fraction of the time it would take me to do it manually. So great for calculating return ROI reports for the people that pay the bills. Okay, so I see we have a question. Give me just 1 sec to read this. Great question. So Sebastian asks, how do we prevent or how do we get notified or prevent things like or when APIs change? So it's really, really common, for example, for an API to be updated or an API to change. One of the benefits of being solely focus on workflow automation is we get to spend a bunch of time thinking about those kind of gnarly problems, like what happens when something goes wrong. And there is a multitude of things that can go wrong when you're automating processes. Everything from, like, as Sebastian says, like a vendor changes their API, or something as simple like someone has automatically, or someone has accidentally deleted an API key, or a token has been deleted, or a system is down, right? How do you compensate for that in Tines? And so the way we do that in Tines is we've got a couple of different things we can do. One of which is what we call agent monitoring. And every single agent in Tines has this option for monitoring. And so what we can do in Tines is click monitor agent, and we have the ability to set information at an agent level. So we can say things like, you know what, I want to notify somebody every single time that an agent fails. So I can say, you know what, let's say sock at example.com and Owen at Tines.io. Every single time this agent fails, and that could be a failure because the API has changed, or it could be something like my credential isn't working, or it could be something like the system is down. And so every single time that happens, Tines is going to consider that agent to have broken, to be not working. And we're going to kick it into what we call a smart retry queue. So it's going to retry that same request over the course of several hours. And if at that point it's still broken, we're going to kick it into a dead job queue. But essentially, it allows you to be notified immediately if something has changed. So if Slack's updated their API without telling people, or a credential has expired, you'll be notified without having to spend any times and Tines looking at these agents. In addition to that, you'll see there's an option up here for notify when no events are emitted. And this is a really, really cool feature. So one of the banes of my existence when I ran security teams was log sources just falling over. And so what would regularly happen would be we'd be sitting around lunch or something like that and be like, you know what, it's been ages since we received a CrowdStrike alert, or it's been ages since we received a particular request. And we'd go and check, and like, sure enough, the logging would have just fallen over like 7 days ago or something like that. With Tines, what you can do is with every agent type, we can say something like, you know what, I expect this agent to emit an event every single day, or like every single minute or every single hour. And if an agent doesn't receive an alert from an external system, or if logs have broken on that external system, even though that's not necessarily something that's broken in Tines, we're still going to be proactive and say, hey, look, you expected this agent that receives alerts from your EDR to emit an event every single hour. We haven't done that in this hour, so maybe it's worth checking on your EDR system or so on. And you can blend those different types of monitoring together to get like very high confidence in your workflows. Hopefully that answers the question. Okay, so one thing we haven't really spoken about so far is what this looks like on like a case management system. And so here, at this point in our story, we created a ServiceNow ticket. So we had determined that the URL was malicious, so we created a ServiceNow ticket. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here, log back in, and go on. Oh, maybe I didn't create it in the right ServiceNow incident. No worries. So let me go back here. And rather than showing you that part, what I'll do is I'll skip on to the editing section. So obviously, the most important part of this whole process is being able to build these stories, right? You do not have to be an engineer. You can be an L1, L2 analyst to build your stories. And so let's say I'm a security analyst who knows this process inside out, but doesn't necessarily know how to write code. But as I'm building this process, I know that my workflow is to send an email every time I determine a URL is malicious. So I want to respond to the original sender, telling them, yes, that email was malicious. Please don't click the link. Thank you for reporting. The way I would have to do that if I was doing this in code is I'd have to go figure out what Python library to use, pull the code out of like some Git repo if it even exists in one, modify my story, test my SMTP creds, deploy it, manage it, so on and so forth. With Tines, all I need to know is which of the 7 agent types is used for sending emails. And you don't got to be a rocket scientist to know that it's probably the email agent that's going to be used to send emails. And so I'm just going to drag an empty email agent, drop it somewhere around URL is malicious, let's say here, and wire it up to URL is malicious. And then I need to configure my agent. And the email agent is probably one of the most simple agents types that we have. We've got recipient, subject, and body. They're like they're the main fields. And so for subject, I'll do something like yes, that was a bad email. Something like that. And the body can be, don't click the link. Something really simple like that. Then I need to enter my recipient. And this is where things get kind of tricky, right? Because I don't know who my recipient is. It's going to be different for every single email that's received. It's going to be a different reporter every single time. What I do know, even though I don't know who it is up front, I know that this email agent, and let's make it a little bit clearer and call it contact victim. Let's say we know that this contact victim agent is going to receive events from URL as malicious. They're wired up. And so URL is malicious. I know that those events are going to look something like this. So this is all the information that's going to be available to the contact victim email agent when it runs. So I've got all the email information. I've got the results from VirusTotal. And I can see here that the user that reported the email in this case was alice@times.xyz. So that's the person I need to send this email to. And that is at checkinbox.from. So all I do, go back to my email agent, delete the placeholder alice@example. I go 2 curly brackets and a dot. And Times is going to be smart enough to tell me exactly what information is going to be available to this agent when it runs. So I can go check inbox dot from. That's it. So now every single time this agent runs, Times is going to replace the data at this path to that placeholder. So this placeholder will go and it'll be replaced by the real data at that field, provided it exists. And that same templating language, we call it liquid templating. That same templating language works in every agent type in every single configuration field. So I can do things like, don't click the link because VT said positives were dot submit to VirusTotal dot body dot positives. And that's it. And now when I run this agent, and I can dry run. So essentially a dry run allows me to test this agent and say, hey, run this agent, show me what the event will look like that it generates based on this sample event. And we can see that sure enough, the email in this case would be sent to alice@times.xyz. And we'd get, don't click the link because VirusTotal said the positives are 5. Awesome. Sebastian asked another good question here. So is it possible to take the reply and continue a particular part of the story? And that's a really good question. So essentially, how do you automate response collection and continuation in the story? So the way we do that in Times is with a feature that we call prompts. And one of the most time-consuming parts of my job in when I ran SecOps teams was reaching out to people and saying things like, hey, don't click the link. Or if you did click the link, let us know. Or did you just log on from China? Or did you just change your password? Or did you mean to open this S3 bucket to public? Whatever it is. And so with Times, we have from day one designed a feature to support that use case. And let me hop into a different story to make it a little bit clearer. So stepping away from phishing at the minute, let's say we have a system that receives an alert every single time a user connects to our production environment or logs onto a jump host or something like that. And that could be coming from our SIM, it could be coming from our EDR, it could be coming from like a CASB, whatever. And that alert is sent to Times. And we want Times to ping the user every single time that happens, or ping the user if the source IP address is potentially malicious or has appeared on like a blacklist or something like that, or we've never seen it before. So let's mock that alert. So the primary way that data is sent to Times is via a webhook agent. And so a webhook agent, for every single webhook agent you create in Times, we generate a unique URL which can be used to receive data from Times. So this can come from like Bitbucket, Jira, GitHub, your EDR, your SIM, it doesn't matter. It's just open standard. And so what we're going to do is we're going to send data, mock some data to that webhook alert as if it was coming from a different system. So we'll say Owen at times.io just authenticated to the VPN from this IP address. So let's run that. And what we'll see is this agent has received an event. We're going to go ahead and create an issue in Jira. We're going to analyze the IP address. We're going to send the user an email, and we're going to send the user a message in Slack. And if I get my Slack, pull Slack over here, hopefully you guys can see this. This is the message that I just received in Slack. And so Tynes has sent me a message in Slack with this information. Hey, we detect an unusual login to your account. This was me. I don't recognize this. And these links are Tynes prompts. So these are just HTTP links. So let me say I don't recognize this. So hey, I didn't log on from China just like a few seconds ago. When I press that link, that's going to open a link back to Tynes and say, thank you, your response has been recorded. That's just a URL, right? And that URL can be included in text message, PagerDuty alerts, Slack prompts, tickets, you name it. It doesn't matter. It's just HTTP. And when I click that link, what's going to happen is my story is going to kick back in, which is this guy. This story here has clicked back in, and I'll see that an event has been emitted just now that says that contains all the information related to that alert and trigger a prompt click compromised. So I have clicked that link and said, I don't recognize that, I'm probably compromised. And then my story is going to continue from there. And I can do whatever I want, right? Just those same 7 agent types. In this case, I'm going to create an incident PagerDuty and lock the account, and I'll update the Jira ticket as well. If I had clicked, you know what, I definitely just logged on from China. Thank you for letting me know, but that's me. It's okay. I go here. And so this trigger agent will fire in that case and say, update the Jira ticket and close the ticket automatically. So no security team has to be involved unless they need to be. And this is really critical, right? Because you're putting the onus for validation on the user who actually knows. Rather than having a security analyst go and trawl through a bunch of logs for like half an hour, you can just immediately ping the user, increase security awareness within the organization, and get fact back that actually matters. And if you wanted to say something like, well, actually, how do I really know that this person did click the link? How do I know that the Slack hasn't been compromised as well? You could easily do something like a duo prompt, right? So you could say, send a second factor authentication to the user in Duo. So you could drop this in here and wire this up. And then if the user clicks the link and says, yep, that was me, I logged out from China, you then send them a Duo prompt saying, hey, thanks for confirming, just like confirm, double check type thing. You have unlimited and ultimate flexibility and Tynes to do whatever you want. Again, it's just those 7 agent types. Okay, so there are a bunch of other things that I can show you guys, but at this point, it probably makes sense with 5 minutes to go to kind of wrap things up. Pause if there's any further questions, and if not, give you guys a couple of minutes back in your afternoon. Okay, cool. Well, with that, I will say thank you all so much for listening and for paying attention. It was a real pleasure to speak today. I really appreciate the flexibility, the feedback, and the questions. If you would like a more purposeful demo, like you want a demo specific to use cases that you have in mind, feel free to ping me. It's Owen@tynes.io, or contact us via tynes.io, and we can set something up for you and your team.